Hi, my name is Eric Hedberg, and for my Capstone Project, I'm going to be talking about does age affect how we perceive time? I'm also going to be talking about how this ties back into psychology later on in the presentation. I'm also going to try to explain it a little better to help you guys understand what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start with how I came up with this idea of does age affect how we perceive time? So when I was little, and I'm sorry, let me restart. Every single year, my family and I goes on a car trip up to Sedona. And I remember when I was little, among the ages of 8, 9, 10, 11, I remember that car trip just feeling so long. I remember bringing movies, books, anything I could because I just remembered that car trip from Sedona just felt so long. But as I got older, like 14, 15, 16, I realized the car trip wasn't long at all, and it didn't seem long anymore. It felt like way shorter. So I came up with the idea that, that age affects how we perceive time, and when we're younger, time feels like it's going by slower, and as we get older, time feels like it's going by faster. And my first chunk of proof to go with this is, as a child, all your experiences are new. All this new stimuli makes time feel slower, and as you become an adult, your body produces mental images slower, which makes time feel faster. Just to back that up, kids are always saying, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" They seem so impatient. Perhaps this is because, what I just said. And then you also hear from older people that life goes by in a blink of an eye, and that just ties back. Those two quotes just tie back on back into the main idea that as we get older, time goes by faster and faster. So I'm going to start with an example first. So let's say we have a 30-year-old adult. Okay, one day for a 30-year-old adult is very little compared to how long they have lived. So this is another proof, by the way, more proof to my idea. So this one day has taken up very little of their life. A 30-year-old has been alive for about 11,000 days. So one day is relatively little in their life so far. It's about 1/11,000. So since it's taking up such a, actually, you know what, just keep this number in mind, 1 out of 11,000. So let's look at a 3-year-old life. One day takes up a much larger chunk of their life. So this one day takes up more time in their life compared to the 30-year-old because a 3-year-old has only been alive for 1,100 days. So one day is going to seem much longer for them when compared to the 30-year-old because for them, one day is taking up more of their life. It's taking up 1,100 of their life. So what I'm saying is the older adult, the 30-year-old, has been alive, and one day has been alive longer, and so one day is a larger chunk. I'm sorry, a shorter chunk for them compared to the 3-year-old, where one day is a larger chunk for them, and thus it's going to make time feel slower for the 3-year-old and faster for the 30-year-old. So to put it in perspective, let's pretend we have a 6-year-old. And the 6-year-old goes on a 1-year boat trip. Okay, so we see they've been alive for 5 years here in the red, and here in the green we have the how long they've been alive while they were on a boat trip. Okay, the 1-year boat trip. I know that's unrealistic, but just roll with it for the example. So we can see this takes up a relatively large chunk of their life. It's 1 year. It takes up a large chunk of their life, so it's going to feel longer when compared to the 16-year-old here. I have a 16-year-old. You can see the blue represents 15 years of their life that they were not on the boat trip compared to the 1 year they were on the boat trip. So as you can see, based on the two, compared to the 3-year-old and 15-year-old, the 6-year-old and the 16-year-old, we can see that the 6-year-old's boat trip takes up a much longer. It takes up a much longer chunk of their life compared to the 16-year-old, and that I think that ties back into the idea of why it feels so much longer for them because it's more of their life that's there. So that's why it feels so much longer for the 6-year-old compared to the 16-year-old because it takes up more of their life, as you can see between these two photos. So how does this tie back into psychology? It could help psychologists with younger patients. It could help them understand that they see the world differently than they do. It could help them understand that they see the world as going by slower when compared to them. It can help psychologists in how they look and handle patients depending on their age. It works vice versa. Maybe if you have an older client, you can help them understand that their days for them seem like it's going by really fast compared to you when it seems slower. Maybe it could help with ADHD. ADHD is defined as one of the symptoms is trouble waiting and being impatient. Maybe it's because of the age of the child, and maybe we shouldn't be looking for ADHD at such a young age and waiting a little bit to see if they're impatient and trouble waiting, and how much I'm sorry, see if their trouble waiting outgrows them as they get older. Because if it's just because of their age, yeah, and it could explain how some people outgrow ADHD. So I ran a quick experiment to see if my base idea was real. I wanted to do this with random people and a lot of people, but due to quarantine, I was only able to do it with my sister and my mom. So my sister's 20 years old, and I had her sit in a room for about 5 minutes. Actually, not about 5 minutes on the dot. I timed her, and then I asked her how long it felt like she was in there, and she said it felt like 8 to 9 minutes. Then my mom, who is 55 years old, sit in a room for 5 minutes, and she said it felt like 5 to 6 minutes. So this ties back into the idea that time feels like it's going slower for my sister, because she said it felt like she was in there for longer than she actually was, compared to my mom, who was pretty much dead on with the time. So yeah, thank you for tuning in and listening to my idea that as we get older, how we perceive time changes. Thank you.